Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Todd Rossnagel. I'm the Director of Communications for the Louisiana Conference. It is great to have everyone along with us. This is our first webinar from the conference office, so we pray that all the gremlins will go away and that this is smooth. We have a great panel on the webinar with us. And so before we start, I wanted to ask Dr. Van Stinson, assistant to the bishop, to open us in prayer. Van, take it away.
Thank you, Todd, and thanks to all of you for your presence. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are mindful that though we are separated by distance, we come together via technology and also acknowledge the presence of your Spirit in our midst. We ask now that that same Spirit would guide us and direct us. Open our hearts and our minds that we might receive the word that you have for us this day as we together try to take our next faithful steps in service to your mission. We give you thanks for this opportunity and pray your blessings upon us all this day and every day. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So this is how this is going to work, everyone. We are going to hear from Dr. Stinson in just a moment, a little bit more on the guidelines and a little bit more on what to expect as we move forward. I do want to thank everyone for being here and thank everyone for participating, first of all, in the poll. We have several responses already. 78% of you are waiting. So that is that's an interesting percentage number. I wasn't anticipating that. So Van's going to start us off with kind of a high-level approach, and then we're going to kind of go around the table, if you will, on some of the folks who have been included in writing and discerning some of the guidelines. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of the guidelines. Those can be found on our website, and I'm fairly certain that all of you have read the guidelines and know about the guidelines. So this is more about what to expect, maybe some questions that you might have. And hopefully on the second half of this webinar, we hope to have about an hour of your time. On the second half of this, we're going to get to some questions. And I'm monitoring those as best I can from here. So without further ado, Dr. Van Stinson, can you give us an opening word? Where do you think we are in all of this, and what have you seen since those guidelines started, since they were released, and the feedback, and what we have planned for us today?
Well, thanks, Todd, and thanks to all of you for joining us. You know, when I reflect on what I've seen, I think what I have seen lays the foundation and framework for really what underlies the production and the sort of sending out of these guidelines. I've been amazed at the ways in which United Methodists throughout Louisiana have stayed faithful to the mission, even as we have lived through the first stages of this uncertainty and anxiety that so typifies this season of COVID-19. In this season of resurrection, as we continue through the Easter season, I've heard the good news proclaimed in various new and innovative ways. I've seen the witness to new life and new hope, even in the midst of difficulty and despair. So that encourages me, and it reminds me that we do strive first and foremost to hold nothing sacred but the mission. Even as we live through this season, you know, that same mission goes before us. I've found myself reflecting in recent days on the fact that the church has never closed. It's just the buildings have been shut down for a season. The church has been open and active. The church is the people. And that has been evident even as the new technological ways of seeing that and being a part of it become more essential to who we are. A couple of thoughts in sort of framing the guidelines. I think that our connectionalism as United Methodists has often been best defined in times of crisis. You know, crisis creates environments for connectionalism to thrive. Whether it's ERT teams forming and deploying almost instinctively in the aftermath of a tornado, VIM teams forming in various parts of the state or around the country, and then streaming into the state in the aftermath of a hurricane, or just colleagues and friends showing up unannounced to help muck out a house that's just flooded. I mean, crisis creates the context and the environment for connection and that covenant that we share to thrive and to be most evident. Problem is that COVID-19 and the season that we're living through currently goes against the very essence of what it means to gather and to connect. I mean, it makes connecting and deploying almost in some cases impossible, certainly difficult, and at times risky. So it really strikes against the essence of who we are to now enter into a season where we begin to redefine connection and connectionalism almost in the opposite sense of we're most connected now when we separate ourselves and remain distant from one another, which just it goes against the DNA of who we are as United Methodists. So that creates the challenge as we begin to think about re-entering our buildings, is how do we do that safely? How do we do that with compassion and care so that we do no harm in our attempt to love God and love our neighbors? And those guidelines that have been presented to the annual conference really are framed with that thinking in mind. I want to say thank you to each of these panelists, to others who are not with us, who have given input and insight, and hopefully during this time together today, we will learn from one another. We will hear some specific ways in which the guidelines are being implemented and the preparations are being made. We encourage you to ask your questions, and this is a collaborative moment for us to connect and to discern what that connection really means for us as we prepare now to take our next faithful steps and begin to re-enter our building. So I'll leave it at that, Todd, and look forward to what my friends and colleagues on the panel have to offer in the coming hour.
Well, thank you, Van. Just to kind of give you a brief rundown of who we have on the panel: Elaine Burley from the conference office, Tom McNamara, who is our attorney of choice. I don't know, Tom, if you're going to be able to answer all of the legal questions that come our way, but thank you for your time today. Reverend Brady Witten from First Church in Baton Rouge, Lamar from West Monroe, and Tiffany Postel from Newman. Let's start. I want to start with you, Tiffany. You and I were talking right prior to this. Why do you think this waiting and getting back into worship, why do you think it's so important to be cautious? You had some thoughts on this.
Hi, everybody. So my thoughts on this go like this. We gave the guidelines, and the guidelines are out there to all keep us safe. And so I know a lot of churches are in areas that say, well, my area, I've been tracking it. We don't have any cases. And you know, so we can just go back to normal. And I just want everybody to know there is no back to normal. We are in a different time. And my background, I was a biologist for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for 16 years. And so the thing with the COVID-19 is that they are still learning as we go. So hence, one day you get they tell you don't do this. And then the next day they might say, okay, well, we're seeing a new trend. We're seeing something different. And so all of this is playing into where we are as people. So my thing is being cautious. You want to be cautious because you don't want it to enter. You don't want to get a case in your church. And you want to do everything that you can to be able to follow all of the guidelines and have protocols in place. The protocols are, you know, the 6 feet of distance, the understanding what your 25% are, especially in phase 1, the 25% of the square footage of your building. You want to actually plan these out and pay attention to those, because though you think, okay, I'm just trying to be, we're going to be fine and we don't have any cases, we can't be sure where everyone has traveled or who everyone has been around. And so it's better in phase 1 to be cautious. Phases are meant to help us to get back to the norm. But phases are also testing. So we're in a test. This test, if it works, we will move to phase 2. If the test does not work, we go back to social distancing altogether and being closed down. And so it's very important in your churches that you pay attention to that. And you do what you need to do to keep you safe so that you can keep your people safe. A lot of churches have people who want to get back because that's what they're used to. I get it. I'm an extrovert, and I've been in this house, and I want to hug, and I love my people. But my people know we're hugging like this now. Hey, because I'm trying to keep them safe. And some people will make the decision to come out, even though they know I'm immunocompromised and I shouldn't. So as a pastor, it is your responsibility to think about the do no harm, to think about what can I best do to keep my people safe.
Thank you, Tiffany. Lamar, it didn't take long for someone to ask a question that I want to ask you because, again, we talked about this prior to starting the webinar. Someone asked this question: I'd like to know what my obligation is if a small rural congregation, you could use this for any congregation, is willing to abide by social distancing but not wearing masks. And we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of that question, but how do you pastorally respond to those who are very adamant about their freedoms and maybe perhaps do not want to wear a mask and don't want to follow the rules? Lamar, you have some thoughts on that?
Well, it wasn't a week after this got started that I was accused of violating rights because I put word out that we were going to be wearing masks when we got back. Made me laugh because political science is one of my hobbies. And what I've done when I've had these conversations is, first thing I've said is, like every responsible citizen of our country, religious freedom is at the forefront of my thoughts with relationship to a lot of things. Now, that being said, with great freedom comes great responsibility. And I asked them, is this a political question? Is this a theological question? Is this a you just wanting to protest kind of question? And asking those kind of questions. And what I found is when where the discussion's gone is people feel they're condescended to. A lot of times we'll just pat on the head. And I've seen some things that our governor has said that have been ripped out of context. But when it comes to masks and all that, my question is, I go back to what Paul said, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's spiritually beneficial. And I ask, why is it that you don't want to wear the mask? What's really going on here? And going back to more of a scriptural foundation about the idea of being a brother's keeper, idea of watching out for one another. And it's not about me. And if I can take some small step to help ensure that my brother or sister is as safe as possible, what does that say about the faith that if I'm fighting for religious freedom, shouldn't I have the freedom to take care of my brothers and sisters in Christ by being responsible with how I conduct myself? And that's, Todd, while they haven't been really 100% satisfied with that answer, I've had more than one of them say, I haven't really thought about it. And I resisted the urge to say, do you fight your freedom enough to tithe 10%? Do you fight your freedom enough to make sure you're here every Sunday? Do you fight your freedom enough to pray for your pastor? You know, I mean, we could go down that road, but I found by taking it seriously, acknowledging that every one of us should look at it, at least the conversation's heard in a different manner. I may not change their mind about the mask, but they feel like they've been heard. And what we did when we put out our guidelines, we put a disclaimer that said is that we respectfully request and expect anyone on our campus to follow all guidelines from public health officials. And we will have masks on hand for those of y'all who may forget them in the car or forget them at the house.
Sorry, muted my microphone. Lamar, thank you. That was great insight. Really do appreciate it. And I would like to encourage all of our panelists. We're at 3:15 now, so you can feel free to ask us a question inside the Q&A, and we will try and get to it as much as possible. Elaine, I'd like to ask you a question. It seems like 10 years ago since you and I recorded a podcast back at the conference office, which seems like 20 years ago that we were back in the office. But we were talking about all the different things that will go into worship, from hand sanitizer to cleaning restrooms to all of these things. What's running through your mind as far as kind of sealing the perimeter and doing all we can to make sure that we're not doing any harm when it comes to hand sanitizing and masks and everything around the perimeter of a church? What's running through your mind?
Well, Todd, I would say the first thing that I want you guys to consider is, do you have adequate supplies on hand? Hand sanitizer is difficult to find right now. And if you don't already have a bulk quantity of that along with automatic dispensers, get on the internet and find it and start ordering that. Same with masks. You're going to have people show up for worship who have forgotten their masks. So you need to be able to have some you can hand to them so they don't have to leave. I would suggest having some greeters placed in the parking lot and along the pathways from the parking lot to the sanctuary, just to remind people as they get out of the car, don't forget your mask, don't forget we are socially distancing even while we worship face to face. A couple of other things that I think would be really helpful is to think through every element of worship. Everything from communion to offering to taking the attendance. We've already mentioned how we pass the peace. We don't want to be hugging people right now. Passing the offering plate is going to pass the virus along with it. So consider having a receptacle that can receive people's offerings without actually having to touch it. If and when you do begin serving communion again, think carefully about how you do that. If the server's hands touch the recipient's hands, that could pass the virus, and then on to the next person in line and so forth. Of course, right now we can't use a common cup, so we're going to end up using those little glasses. And you might want to put a basket somewhere up front where people can drop their cups in after they've had the juice. Keep in mind that your volunteers who show up on Monday morning to count the Sunday offering have to take special precautions. As Tiffany said, there's still so much that we're learning about this virus, and the medical experts don't really know yet how long that virus can remain on surfaces like currency. So your volunteer money counters are going to want to wear gloves and a mask and keep from touching their face after they've touched the offering. Attendance, it's vital that you take attendance. If someone in your congregation does test positive, the state is now ramping up their contact tracing, and if that positive person came to worship, they're going to want to know who else was there. But passing attendance pads, again, is a great way to pass the virus. So find another way of taking attendance. Maybe something like text in church, or having ushers who know everybody's name write that down. Of course, marking off pews. And I find that coming into worship, this is a great time for pastors to want to visit with their members and check in on them. But remember, as a pastor, you have to stay 6 feet away too. Prepare yourself for that, because that's going to be hard. And then as people are leaving worship, how do you prevent the aisles from being crowded? You might want to think of dismissing the sanctuary pew by pew by pew, so people can still maintain that 6 feet of separation. Bathrooms, you've got to disinfect those bathrooms after everybody uses them. You might need to limit the use of a bathroom to one person at a time, depending on the size of your facilities. And I know there's been some conflicting guidance from the CDC about the use of pew Bibles and hymnals in the sanctuary. I would err on the side of caution and just remove those things from the sanctuary until CDC has better guidance on things like that. You're going to have to disinfect your sanctuary after every worship service. So if you have multiple services, it might be better to hold them in different spaces so that you've got adequate time to disinfect. And then finally, I would consider calling your insurance agent and just asking what would happen if we failed to follow proper procedures and someone became infected. Do we have insurance coverage? Some companies are denying coverage. Others are saying that if that happens, we're going to drop you as a client.
Right.
You just want to know where you stand on that.
Thank you, Elaine. Just want to clarify one of the points that Elaine referenced earlier. Communion is not in phase one, so we're just not there yet. I know it's coming. Hopefully, it's coming. As Tiffany mentioned earlier, this is going to be sort of like a test as we go forward. So just a clarifying remark there on communion. Brady Whitten, large church pastor. I know that that you are getting ready. I have a couple of questions for you. I understand that you are going to it's not a ticketing system, but it's more of a kind of a, well, you explained, it's like a seating chart, if you will. Tell me how you guys are responding and moving forward.
Yeah, so one of the unique positions we found ourselves in is we have a brand new renovated sanctuary that none of our people have been inside yet. And they are very interested in coming inside the sanctuary. And so we had to have some way in managing the 25% number of knowing who's coming and when. We looked at Eventbrite actually has a nonprofit side that they were going to, we could have people do tickets. I know Wesley would love Methodists coming to church with tickets in their hands, but we just kind of felt a little strange about that. It seemed odd to buy a ticket to come to church. And so we decided to go with a reservation system. And so we found something called the Pastor's Toolbox that allows people to go in and just say, hey, well, here's who's coming. This is the number of people we're bringing. And it also gives us our first opportunity to let them know when they come, these are the things that will be expected. You need to have a mask, you need to, practice safe social distancing. And at least that way we can, and we're doing like a lot of restaurants do, and we are I shouldn't tell anybody this. Don't tell anybody this. We are keeping some open slots because we don't want to have to turn people away. But at some point in time, we're going to have to turn people away. And that's one real quick comment I wanted to make about people who come and who refuse to wear masks. I actually already had a situation in our church where I had to be the authority and I had to tell people to leave. And I will tell you, the people looked at me kind of funny, and I did it gracefully and nicely as I could. But I felt like as the pastor, it was my job to protect the other people that were around. And it was a situation where we had more than 10 people in a room. And, everybody kind of went, oh, gosh, shucks, and kind of looked at me funny. And I had to kind of say, no, I'm serious. Some people need to leave. And so I would not be surprised if we find ourselves in some of those circumstances. And of course, I know we as pastors all know how to assert ourselves gracefully. But I think we may find ourselves in some of those situations.
Brady, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question, and it was brought up in the chat from Bob Dyke. There's been a lot of talk about worship. I'd like to hear comments on restarting groups, both inside, Sunday school, youth, etc., outside, scouting groups. You're actually, I think, at First Church, kind of starting with some small prayer services, but I know that I think VBS is planned and ready for the summer. Can you address some of what maybe Bob is asking?
Yeah, we are, the only thing that we are restarting is some small prayer services during the week. So we're not restarting classes. We're not restarting meetings. We're not doing our normal Sunday morning thing. And for all the reasons everybody knows, it's just too difficult to manage. We felt like we could manage groups of people coming to one room. We're controlling the entrances, the exits. We're going to try to. But when it comes to small groups, especially to the facility of our size, we've got about 8 different entrances. What we were prepared for was people coming in and saying, oh, our group only has 10 people. Okay, but what if there's 12 groups of 10 people? Now you got 120 people who've all used potentially the same doorknobs, the same water fountains. So we're just holding off on doing all group gatherings for now. The children's decision, and I can't remember where I heard this was not me, but I heard somebody somewhere was tying their decision about allowing children and youth activities to the decisions of the local schools. And it just made so much sense to me. They're doing a lot of thinking about this. They got people that are, really having to figure out what's the safest thing for children. I felt like it was just it takes one decision off my plate, that when the schools say it's safe for the children to resume in-person activities, we will resume in-person activities. And partly because if you think it's hard to get adults to practice safe social distancing, imagine with a bunch of kids. So we're holding off on that. And to the VBS question, we have already planned online vacation Bible school. And I want to make sure everybody knows Orange, Cokesbury Group, and Lifeway, which are all the normal VBS providers, are all doing online options this year. We're developing our own at First Methodist, and we'd love to have you all use our stuff if you want to, but there are a lot of resources out there for online vacation Bible school.
Tom, there's a question here, and I don't know that if you know the answer, so I apologize for putting you on the spot here. One of the questions is do we have an idea of what the occupancy restrictions will be for phase 2? Either you or Van, do either of you know the answer to that question? Tom is muted. Here we go.
I do not, and I do not believe they've been published yet. We are following the open safety guidelines of the state fire marshal. And the most recent iteration of that is from May 14th, and it doesn't even address phase 2 at this point. So.
Okay. So again, just if you're just joining us, or maybe you didn't catch it right off the top, we do have a poll question that's going, and I wish I knew and I had the bandwidth to be able to pull up my second poll question. Maybe I'll be able to do that after we get to another comment. But the poll question right now is really interesting as far as the results, at least to me. I didn't know that this would be such a disparity, but 75% of you are answered no, that you are not going to gather when you're able to gather, that you are waiting. So panelists, what are your thoughts on this? Van, I'd like to get maybe your thoughts on I'm not saying that that's the majority of the entire conference. It's certainly just the majority of those who are on this this webinar right now. But your thoughts on people, if you pay attention to social media right now, everybody is clamoring to go to church, and we get that. But yet at the same time, I think we're being cautious. What does that say to you?
Well, it says to me that our folks are really taking seriously the responsibilities that come along with the freedoms that Lamar spoke of earlier. Really, a couple of folks have reached out to me and gone down the road of, these guidelines encroach upon our freedom to worship. Well, I really appreciate the way Lamar framed it, because really the greatest exercise of freedom is oftentimes the freedom to choose not to do something. And so the guidelines are simply stating, at the earliest, assuming social distancing guidelines and all safety precautions are able to be put into place, here's when we believe that we can begin to re-enter our buildings. Frankly, I'm hopeful that most of our congregations will wait to gather until they can do so safely and following all of the precautions and all of the practices, which once you start listing them and realizing what it takes, there are likely only a few congregations who can marshal the resources, both financial and personnel, to safely do that on May the 31st. So I'm encouraged by it. And it is something that I think we need to continue to monitor, because likely, with this being a moving target, that May 31st date in the next week, that could be a moving date as well, because Bishop Harvey's been clear and the guidelines are clear that for now, based on everything that we know now and based on where the governor is and the state is and the fire marshal is, here's the decision. Those dynamics are ever evolving and constantly changing, and we want to be attentive and faithful. And it's reassuring to me that so many of our leaders are paying close attention and waiting until they're absolutely able to re-enter and do no harm to anyone.
The second poll question is now live, and we're getting some responses already. The question is, will you continue online worship? I have heard from several pastors who have said, I cannot wait to get inside my building so that I don't have to do online worship anymore. And there's been a lot of talk about how this is going to change everything, and that online worship is here to stay. And the reality is, as I don't know the answer. I don't know that that's actually going to be the case. So I'd like to hear your responses so far. And once again, my thoughts were wrong. Only one person has answered no. 88% of you have said you will continue online worship, which is a good thing, I think, in my opinion, because I think it's good. So let's go around to some of the active pastors. Lamar, I'll start with you. Are you going to continue online worship? Have you found it to be worthy of continuing as we go forward?
It's been fun to dive into the online worship. 2.5 months ago, I would have had political and financial resistance to this. And our people have found that it is such an essential part of the ministry of our church that they have begged me to make sure that we do whatever we need to continue it, to the point that our finance committee adjusted the budget to give us the money needed for things like eCam, Restroom, those kind of things to push forward, because it's not just about online worship, but it's about facilitating people's participation in the life of the church. And when we put, and the way that we're talking about it with our people is not as a substitute, but as a complement to those times when you can't get to worship. Or for those, we have some in our at-risk population who it's going to be important for them to wait till phase 3 or phase 4 or whatever. My wife, Reverend Erin Oliver, is not able to attend worship when we start because she's immunocompromised. And the most reaction I've ever gotten to an email is from an email that said, "Your pastor's wife will not be in church first Sunday." And the online worship has been an essential part of people feeling comfortable about our road forward.
Thank you, Lamar, for that. Let's get to some questions now. We're at about 3:32 here. And questions, panelists, if you see something, raise your hand, or because I got 1,000 things going on here. Adam Philly has a question. And I don't know that we've addressed this, singing and choirs. What are thoughts about small vocal groups singing during worship in lieu of full choir? They would, of course, be adhering to strict social distancing. Brady, what are your thoughts on that?
So we have been using small ensembles for online worship when there are there's no congregation present. However, when there is a congregation present, we are not going to do singing with the congregation. We may use a soloist, but we actually have gotten our tape measure out, and it's something like 33 feet from our choir loft to the front pew. And so
right.
we're trying to, I joked around about putting some plexiglass up. I kind of was half joking, but anyway. So when there are people when there are not people in the room, we've been handling it one way. When there are people in the room, we'll be much more restrictive about how we're handling it. And I know we need to protect the singers also. I know that's part of it. But that's where we are with it.
I don't, and maybe I should try and get this poll question out there, but I would love to know, and maybe you guys can chat this up with some answers, but the thing that runs through my mind, if I were to do this, okay, obviously don't have a church that I'm pastoring, but do I have enough hand sanitizer? Like, how are you, where are you getting the hand sanitizer from? We can't even find it locally in some of the stores. Lamar, I see you kind of smiling. Did you make yours at home? What do you do?
Actually, it's funny. We have a guy here in town that I was introduced to by a member who's giving us the automatic dispensers and servicing them weekly for $5 a week per dispenser. And so that problem just got solved, and we've got enough. And part of the other deal, and I want to piggyback off something Brady said, looking at the number of entrances, part of the way we're managing how much we need to have on hand is we're only going to have one entrance open on each side of the building to help with that very question, which we think is actually going to reduce the amount of hand sanitizer and other things needed, because you're not going to have to stock as many machines at one time.
Yep, good answer, and blessings for that blessing that you have for hand sanitizer. So we've got a question here, Van. I'll pose this to you. The question is, so there was that 2-week difference between what the governor said and where we are now. There was some great, I don't want to say great, there was a tremendous amount of discernment because there was, we knew that the governor was going to say something, or at least we had an inkling that there was going to be something said, and that we had that 2-week gap. The question is, if the state moves into phase 2 on June 5th, which is a guess at this point, will the conference kind of stay in that 2-week period between what the state says and what the conference says?
I think that's a good question. I think the short answer is we will certainly evaluate, all of the recommendations that come and the directives that come from the fire marshal and from the governor. Some of it will depend on the feedback we get from our local churches who are beginning to open up and who are figuring out how to manage this in ways that we don't yet know, the difficulties, possibly some of the gaps. But in the event that we see that a directive or guidelines from the conference can enable churches to move more faithfully into whatever phase 2 would look like for local churches, certainly we will do our best to offer guidelines, certainly with much input and feedback throughout the conference from this group and others. I don't know that we could say a definite yes or no to that at this point, but certainly we'll pay close attention to those guidelines as they shift and change.
Tom, I wanted to ask you a question that I've heard online. This question has not been asked in the Q&A, but it is one that I hear a lot online, and I suspect that pastors will have to deal with this as well. The question, or the accusation, if you will, that you are restricting my religious freedom by not allowing me to go to worship, or perhaps you're restricting my religious freedom by not allowing me to come in because I don't have a mask on. We can get into the legality of that, which I would prefer not to, but what would be your response, Tom?
Thank you, Todd, and I'd prefer not to get into the legality as well. I want to, because you've shown great respect for my Juris Doctorate degree, I'd like to point out that we are specifically not giving legal advice here today. I actually am a retired attorney who is now the administrator of a large mid-sized church in Lafayette. So having said that, let me just say that we are not setting up our church or our conference for a debate about the First Amendment and the right to worship. What we have tried to chart out here among those who said months ago, you can't keep me from going to church or opening my church, that's a matter of First Amendment constitutional law, all the way over to those who still say, I will not return to church until I am guaranteed that it is safe and I'll never get never have any problems when I go to church. We're trying to chart out a very practical, faithful response for the conference and our individual churches that says, what practically are we able to do? What is a faithful response? What are our government regulators and regulations advising us to do? And to take all of those into account when we chart a course that seems to us fair, safe, reasonable, and faithful. And I will tell you, for our church, we have made the decision that we are going to follow the guidelines that require masking at all times by congregation members in the church. And we are going to have trained volunteers, and the pastors are going to be ready to speak from the pulpit that simply say, I'm sorry, I understand you're not comfortable wearing a mask, and I hope you understand that we're going to ask you just not to participate in the service. And certainly we have the right to govern ourselves in the way that we think is fair, safe, appropriate, and faithful. And that's how I think we should approach that question.
Thank you, Tom. Tiffany, I wanted to ask you a question because you may run into this, you may not, when you eventually get to the point. And Brady briefly touched on it, of what do you do with the 51st person in line? You can only have 50 come in. How do you gracefully tell, what do you say to that person? Give our pastors maybe a word of advice as to kind of how you throw your arms. Well, you can't throw your arms around the person. What do you say in that particular spot?
You know, first and foremost, I think you can, in these times, we cannot over communicate anything. Okay. And that is the biggest thing. Communicate, 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 communicate. And some of us, our churches will not be able to have will not embrace, I'm going to say not going to be able to have, but not embrace alternative measures to know who will show up at church and who will not show up at church. And it will just go, by the day. And so I think in that case, the 51st person to come, you're just being honest. Hey, today we have reached the capacity that we can have inside of the church. And I know this sucks and this does not make any sense, but we are trying to be faithful and live into the guidelines that we have been given, and you are number 51. And you offer in that case, this is what I would do. In that case, you would offer someone from your leadership that maybe could step outside with them, of course, social distance, but step outside with them, offer prayer, and then just tell, just tell them, because some people are always gonna try to be in that first 50 and
Sure.
never going to understand that, can you just not be prompt today, because that might let somebody who's not prompt get there on time and have a space. But you can't ask people to do that. People are going to come to church how they feel. And so honesty is our best policy. Over communication is our best policy. You could even, in that case, you could even have, I would say you could even have like a bag or something that you would give to them that may even let them, if you're going to continue the online, lead them to the online portion so that they can do it. And that's going to be your best bet in these times. And you're doing that to make sure that you don't hurt them, that you don't do any harm to them. You don't want to create a narrative that you're not wanted here, because we want you here. We're just trying to follow these guidelines and keep everybody safe. And one other point that I will add is, anything that you come up with, someone who doesn't want to wear a mask, someone who is pushing back on any of the anything, any kind of pushback, what you're trying to get them to understand is, we're not asking you to do the things for you. We're asking you to do the things for the other people, for everybody else, those who might be immunocompromised. We're asking you to have a heart for that person, to have a heart for those people who are out here and who really just want to be out here and be a part, but they're doing the best that they can even to keep themselves safe. And so if we could just promote that, when people, the biggest thing is when somebody is pushing back on something, redirect them, help them to see how they can be the bigger person, or they can be a part of the solution and not necessarily a part of the problem. So redirect them, change their perspective on why we've been asked to do this.
Some of the questions have also come in regarding the restrooms, and how you are cleaning the restrooms. I do not believe that the state guidelines say that you have to clean them after every single use, but the best case scenario is to clean them after every single use. Some have said that they're going to maybe potentially get some of the staff to help with that, maybe even the local Boy Scouts. Chime in if you can. Lamar, Brady, what do you guys, Tiffany, what do y'all do?
So I'll just quickly, in talking to my leadership, one of the things and why I just will not let us even move toward this first phase yet, is we don't have proper protocols and standard operating procedures on certain things. And until you have those type of things listed and understand what your bathrooms, you need to look at your bathrooms. If you have a four stall bathroom, if you have a 1 stall bathroom, understanding what those are, and understanding, okay, if we in this bathroom only 2 stalls can be used, okay, we're going to use stall number 1 and 3. Understanding what that looks like, and then what it means when we go in there. The questions that you should be asking, are we going to trust them to clean and to supply them what they need to clean and wipe down the bathroom themselves? Or are we going to have bathroom monitors, like going back to school? Are we going to have bathroom monitors who will monitor how many people go in there, who comes out, and before each person goes in and out, or they let somebody in, they're going in there? And that's where this becomes this is all of us, not necessarily just me, the pastor, or my leadership, but this is everybody, so understanding what that looks like to do it. Right now, my church doesn't have a protocol. So guess what? Until we have a protocol on everything, we've decided not to move forward into going back into the church building, because we have to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
Todd,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say that for us, part of that is we've put together a hospitality team where we've got people all the way in and out. And part of educating the congregation is letting them know that part of the hospitality team's ministry is answering questions like who's cleaning the bathroom, and that what we're trying to do is make it, instead of making them guidelines coming down from on high, we're making them opportunities for people to participate so we can open that much faster and that much sooner. And I want to go back 1 second to say quick hit. The capacity question is one reason why we are waiting at least until phase 2 to come back, is because we don't want to have to deal with person, in our case, 111. We chose to wait rather than have to face that discussion or to have the hard questions about how many services, because it's going to be hard enough. So I just wanted to hit that real quick.
We have a great question that I would like to pose to the panelists here. It's a question regarding if someone falls or becomes ill in service. Will we be able to assist that person? I'm assuming they mean, even mouth to mouth. Or should we immediately call 911? We normally offer assistance, then call 911 if the illness or injury necessitates that. Not sure how to handle going forward. It's a complicated issue, isn't it?
Todd, it is a complicated issue. If someone becomes sick while they're in the building, it's really important to have identified a space where you can isolate them until they're able to go home or go to the ER. If someone is injured, if they fall, and that happens a lot, especially with our elderly in the congregation, I cannot imagine not helping them up. That would put me at risk. It could put them at risk. But I cannot imagine not doing something to help and then calling 911.
Right. Absolutely.
And there is one other piece of advice that I heard the other day that I think is important to pass on. Our churches have been shut down for weeks now. And I want you to think about all of your water faucets and water fountains that have not been used in the past several weeks. It's really important to flush those pipes of all that stagnant water, because that's an ideal breeding ground for germs.
Absolutely. Another question here, and I'm not sure that anybody in the panel is doing this. So Van, maybe you can give some, I don't mean to hit Van with questions that you might not know, but what are your thoughts in regards to outdoor drive-in worship? How would you follow a capacity guideline, specifically when it comes to an outdoor space?
Just to clarify, in terms, you said outdoor drive-in, is it?
Yeah, it's both. Outdoor, I'm assuming the space just in the parking lot. Right now, we do have some churches that are kind of doing the drive-in church, and not getting out of their vehicles, if you will. What would it be like if they did an outdoor space? I'm assuming the guideline would be 6 feet of separation at that point, right? Because the space isn't enclosed. Do I have that right, Tom? What are your thoughts on this?
Tom is muted.
Oh, I can unmute him. Hold on.
Sorry, I was actually looking for the regulation so I could share with you. But let me just refer folks to the state fire marshal has issued a specific and separate set of guidances for outdoor worship services.
Yes.
And without trying to go into it now, if you're planning to have those, check with the fire marshal's office. The document itself is online, and there's a specific set of guidances for that.
Yeah, and people are quickly chatting and reminding me that there are state guidelines for the outdoor worship, and that the state has a protocol on that. So thank you for that. Another question about elevators. It's hard to practice 6 feet of separation inside an elevator. What are y'all, Brady? What are you doing with your elevators? Are they even operational? I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
We have no reason to use the ones for the worship services we're planning. We have a new one that is opening that will go into the sanctuary for handicapped folks. So if somebody absolutely had to use one, and to Tiffany's point, yes, we are having hall monitors and door monitors and bathroom monitors. And I mean, Francie Hooten wrote in the comments, I thought it was a great idea. They're using their nursery workers for some of that. Those are people that, we usually have on our payroll. And so that's a great idea. But yes, so we'll probably have to have an elevator monitor because we do have one elevator we're currently installing for people who have to have an elevator to get into the sanctuary. So, but I think, all right, I'm going to say, try to be nice about people. You all manage people, and you work with large congregations and large groups of people. People don't do what they're supposed to do. You know that. You can't, somebody has to be there to help them to remember to do what they're supposed to do. And I say that with all the love of Jesus in my heart.
Indeed. Can someone speak to insurance coverage regarding virus cases and spreads during worship gathering? The possibility of insurance coverage. Elaine, I think you briefly mentioned insurance coverage and making sure that you're all set, right? What are your thoughts there?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important that you call your insurance agent and ask about what coverage is available.
Yeah.
If someone becomes sick, someone who's attended your worship tests positive, it'll be extremely difficult to trace their exposure to your worship service, but that does not mean you won't be sued anyway. And you want to know before that happens whether you will be covered by your insurance. I've heard some people say that their insurance company has denied coverage. Every policy is different, so make sure you know.
Next question that comes to us, and by the way, the Q&A is out there. If you have a question, please ask away. Well, we're coming up on an hour here, and we can go farther than an hour if we need to. Trying to respect everyone's time. No one has dropped out, so 100% attendance here, so that's good. The content, I guess, is good. The question here, as far as taking attendance, we know that that's very important for contact tracing. What are some information that will be required when we are taking the attendance? Not just that Mary Smith was here, but do we need to get more information from Mary? Do we need her contact info, her street, what information do we need?
Todd, real quick, that's another good reason for the reservation system. People will be telling us that they're coming before they come. And it'd be real easy to follow up on someone to find out if they weren't there or not. But the assumption is if people made a reservation, they're going to show up. So
with that being said, Brady, what are you asking for?
Name and an email address is really all you need today. But if they're connected to First Methodist, we'll have their information already. And then we do an electronic connection card. We're usually seeking one form of communication. So either an email, a cell phone, or an address is what we try to get from people. People are hesitant to share their physical addresses anymore. We can often get a cell phone or a email from people though.
Todd, it might also be a good idea to take a photograph of the congregation every Sunday, so you could tell at a glance who was sitting where. In case someone on the third pew in the middle tests positive, you'll be able to tell from that photograph who was sitting around that person, and they'll know who to contact then.
Todd, one of the things that we're looking at, we haven't put out a lot of details yet because we don't want to give people targets to shoot at before we get ready to open. But one of my intentions is we're going to let people know that we're taking this information, and we want them to know that if we are contacted by public health authorities to help them in a specific case with contact tracing, that is our intention. So that way, no one is surprised later on. I know there's a lot of what I call tinfoil hat stuff going around the Facebook world on that, but I just want us to be upfront with our people about the fact that this is part of our ministry to the community, is being responsible and having that one point of contact like Brady did. But we don't want to have that fight after the fact. We're going to be proactive in saying up front that during this time, it is our intention when needed for a specific case to share the contact tracing information.
Thank you for that, Lamar. I wanted to make a point, as a point that Tiffany made earlier as the communications guy in the panel here. At this particular point, there is no such thing as over communication. And marketing and advertising specialists will tell you that the moment you get sick and tired of telling someone something is the moment they've probably just started paying attention. So don't assume that if you send one email to your congregation with the rules, that one email will suffice. Maybe if you have a tremendous amount of rules that you need to get across to folks, that maybe you chunk that up. And if you have a website, make that the very first thing that people go to and see. Make it very clear. Try to use as few words as possible. Try to use pictures to convey. If you're going to talk about restrooms, use a picture or clip art or an icon about some of this stuff to draw people's attention. So don't be afraid to communicate often. And because I'm telling you that we're so distracted, we're doing nothing, yet we're distracted by all the things that are online. I don't mean to say we're doing nothing, because there are people who are doing phenomenal things out there. But you get my point, is that there's just a lot of stuff out there, and we need to do our very best to communicate. And the best way to do that is to communicate as often as possible. And if someone accuses you of over communicating, there's 1,000 people behind there that probably haven't heard the message. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
And Todd, I'd like to add to that just for a moment and just kind of take a look at what we're actually doing here, because we're facing it in our church. We are all taking populations who are largely unmanaged on a Sunday morning or self-managed. And we are changing a complete set of expectations, and that is we are expecting that they will become managed by our volunteers and our worship leaders. And the earlier we can start pushing out, Brady's talking about Eventbrite and other registration. We're going to use a registration form, and our registration, we are going to push out expectations. We're going to push out expectations regarding masking and distancing and the importance of protecting others, not just protecting yourself. And I hope everyone will get the idea that from that very first communication, we are actually really very, very much in need of managing people's expectations. What does it look like? What is going to be required of me? What will the process look like? And so that your worship leaders can then mirror those expectations as they're saying, okay, we need you to go ahead and put on your mask, stay 6 feet apart and all those things. But from that very first communication, start managing the expectations to help you manage the people when they get there.
Great words. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Well, we're coming up on 4 o'clock here, and I'm trying to adhere to our 1 hour rule here. And so to close us out, Van, we started with you. I guess we'll end with you. If you could kind of give us a word here to close us out. Maybe what your thoughts are and what you've heard so far, and going forward as we get set to reopen eventually.
Well, again, just thanks to the members of the panel for sharing this time, for the participants. I think we've had 114 to 115 folks stick with us the entire hour. So hopefully the ripple effect of this information going out, I do believe, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, that we did record this, so it will be available and posted. So get the word out to folks who may want to view it, and certainly it will be the first of others to come, I'm sure, as this phased in process continues. You know, connection in the Methodist tradition has always been an ever evolving and adaptive concept. You go all the way back to the beginning of the Methodist movement, and, you know, connection has been defined and redefined. It's adapted, it's shifted, it's evolved. We are practical theologians as United Methodists, whether we be clergy or lay. We live our faith and we respond to the gospel, and we change in ways when needed, so that the good news can continue to be proclaimed and the gospel can go forth. So I have no doubt, I have full faith and confidence in our churches and our pastors, that together we can figure out how to navigate this, the uncertainty. We certainly have a theological tradition that prepares us for times such as this. And I am grateful to those who continue to work hard at remaining faithful to that mission as we continue to live into this, and as connection gets redefined in new and innovative ways during this next season of life and ministry in the conference and in the United Methodist Church. So again, just much gratitude and much thanks, and we will continue to monitor this and provide more information. And we're always open to feedback. I mean, this is a shared endeavor and a shared responsibility as we go forward together. So thank you.
Thank you to all of the panelists, Lamar, Tom, Tiffany, Brady, Elaine. Prayer works, by the way, because we had some gremlins earlier today when we did our first practice session, and they miraculously went away. So Lamar, I'm going to pick on you because you're the first person I see on my screen here. Can you close us out with a prayer?
Be happy to. Oh, gracious Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to minister to your people and to your world in this time of uncertainty and doubt. Lord, may you use us as instruments of your peace, to bring peace, to bring hope, to bring healing to so many. And Lord, our prayer is that the work that we do is not ours, but it is yours. Lord, may you anoint us with your Spirit to know what is in accordance with your will and to go in that direction. Lord, may your grace continue to be with us now and always. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, by the power of the Holy Spirit, to the glory of God the Father. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. One final word before we say goodbye. This is being recorded. It will be shared. And you can also go to our website, find the reentry guidelines, and still submit a question to those that are busy working on the guidelines. Until we see you again, thank you and have a blessed day.